All right, welcome everyone to another deep dive. Today we're taking a look at something that I think a lot of people find pretty intimidating, and that's the Australian immigration form. So if you're out there and you are facing this pile of paperwork, well, hopefully today we can kind of demystify it for you and make it all feel a little bit less scary.
Yeah,
Hmm.
immigration forms, they can be a real headache. And Australia's, well, it's no exception. But we've actually done a pretty deep dive for you. We've been going through this guide. It's called Ultimate Guide to the Australian Immigration Form. Appropriately enough, it's a PDF. And, it's got everything in there. It's got instructions and common mistakes that people make and expert opinions and statistics and case studies. So we've gone through it all and we've pulled out what we think are the really key points for you.
So it's like a cheat sheet.
Exactly.
So you don't have to go through all the headaches yourself.
Yeah, consider this your shortcut, basically.
Perfect. So, you might be thinking, like, why a whole deep dive on just a form? But, this is not just any old piece of paper. This is kind of a big deal, right? Because this form is basically what's going to make or break your visa application, right?
Absolutely. This is it. This is the make or break moment.
Yeah.
It's a legal requirement. It's the main thing that the Australian authorities use to figure out if you're eligible to be there or not. So, you really got to get this right.
No pressure.
Yeah, a little typo, a missing piece of information, that can lead to delays.
All right.
It can even lead to your application being denied. So,
Mm.
so for all of you out there who are going through this process, understanding this form,
Mm.
it's really crucial.
Yeah, really important stuff. Okay, so let's just break it down then. What actually is the Australian immigration form? What are we actually talking about here?
Okay, so in a nutshell, it's basically this official document that anyone who wants to go to Australia needs to fill out. And, whether you're just visiting or you want to stay there permanently or even become a citizen, this is where it all starts.
Hmm.
And it's pretty detailed.
Mhm.
They ask for all sorts of stuff, your personal details, your travel history, where you're going, what you're doing, why you're going.
Yeah, all the nitty-gritty.
Yeah, the whole 9 yards, really.
And there are different versions of this form, right? Depending
Mhm.
on what you're trying to do in Australia.
Exactly.
Okay.
So, if you're just planning a trip, you want to see the sights, visit some family, you're probably going to be using Form 1419. That's the one for the visitor visa, which they
Yeah.
call subclass 600. But if you're a student, you want to study down under, well then you're going to need Form 157A. That's for the student visa or subclass 500. And, with that one, you'll hear a lot about the GTE, the genuine temporary entrant requirement.
Oh, yeah, the GTE. I've heard about that.
Yeah, they basically want to make sure that you're actually going there to study and that you're planning on coming back home afterwards.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And then, of course, there's people who are, highly skilled. They've got something to offer Australia and they want to work there. So for them, it's Form 1276, the skilled migration visa.
Hmm.
And then there's folks who want to join their Australian partners. And for them, it's Form 47 SP,
Hmm.
which is for the partner visa. That actually covers both the temporary and the permanent stages. And then, if you're really serious, you want to make Australia your forever home, you're going to need Form 47 PA. That's for permanent residency. So, first things first, you got to figure out which form is the right one for you.
Yeah, sounds like there's one for pretty much every scenario.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, so let's say you figured that out, right? You know which form you need. What are the things you should have ready to go before you even start filling it in?
Okay, well, this is where preparation is really key. The guide really emphasizes this. So get all your ducks in a row. I mean, literally, you're going to need your passport and make sure you have all the details exactly right, names, dates, everything. Don't even think about paraphrasing or, going from memory here. Get that passport out.
Word for word. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. And then, money talks. You got to prove you can support yourself while you're in Australia. How much? Well, that depends on what kind of visa you're applying for. But have those financial documents ready.
Show me the money.
Exactly. And if you've already got your travel plans sorted out, flights, accommodation, that kind of thing, we'll have those details on hand too. And if you're lucky enough to have someone sponsoring you in Australia, make sure you've got all their information too. The point is, the more you can gather up front, the smoother the whole process will be.
Yeah, that makes sense. Get it all together, save yourself some headaches later on.
Exactly. No one likes going back and forth.
Okay, so then you actually get down to filling out the form.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to accuracy, what are the things that our listeners should really, really pay attention to?
Well, Your personal details, they have to be spot on. I mean, your name, your date of birth, your nationality, it all has to match your passport exactly. You'd
Mm.
be surprised how many people trip up on this. You know, a tiny mistake can really mess things up.
Yeah, no room for error.
No room for error, right.
Yeah.
And you've also got to be really clear about why you're going to Australia in the first place. Don't be vague,
Yeah.
be specific. What are you going there to do? What's the purpose of your trip?
So, like, don't just say tourism, say, I'm going to visit Sydney Opera House in Uluru.
Exactly. Give them the
Be
details.
specific.
Yeah, paint them a picture.
Okay, and then there are these kind of trickier sections, right, about health and character. I feel like a lot of people get kind of nervous about those.
Yeah, understandably. So, they're going to ask about any health conditions you might have. And depending on what you're applying for, you might have to get a medical exam. Now, this is important. If you've got any kind of criminal record, you got to be upfront about it. Don't try to hide anything.
Honesty is the best policy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Being dishonest, it's just going to backfire. It could even get you banned from Australia.
Yeah, not worth the risk. Okay, so you've filled everything out, you've triple-checked it, you've attached all your supporting documents. What's the last thing you should do before you hit that submit button?
Oh, this is crucial. Review, verify, check again. I mean, go through every single field, every document, make sure you haven't missed anything. And if you can, have someone else look over it too. A fresh pair of eyes can catch things you might have missed.
That's such good advice.
That's a lifesaver,
Yeah.
honestly. Because a silly mistake at this stage, it can set you back weeks, months even.
And nobody wants that.
Nobody wants that.
Right. So let's talk about those rejections then, because, it happens, right? And the guide actually highlighted some common mistakes that people make.
Yeah.
What are the big ones that our listeners should try to avoid?
Okay, so the number one culprit, it's just simple, inaccurate, or incomplete information. And that can be anything from a wrong number to a blank field. And you know what? Missing signatures, that's another big one. You wouldn't believe how many people forget to sign the darn thing.
It's easy to overlook, you're so focused on filling everything out.
Exactly. And then, of course, you got to make sure you fill out every single required section. Don't skip anything.
Yeah, don't take shortcuts.
Don't take shortcuts, right?
Now, the guide actually gave the top 6 reasons why applications get rejected. So let's walk our listeners through those, shall we? What's number 1?
Number 1, we've already talked about it. Incorrect or incomplete information. Number 2, not attaching the right supporting documents. They ask for specific things. Make sure you provide them. And number 3, this one's interesting, choosing the wrong visa category. You got to be honest with yourself about what you're going to Australia for.
So if you're really going there to work, but you apply for a tourist visa, you're probably going to get caught.
You're going to get caught. That's not going to fly.
Okay, so that's the first 3. What about the next 3? What else should our listeners be aware of?
Okay, so number 4 is money problems. Yeah, you got to pay the right fees, and any mistakes there, they can really hold things up. Number 5, not meeting the health and character requirements. So like we talked about, get those medical checks if you need to, provide those police certificates. And number 6, this one's a killer, submitting your application late. Don't miss those deadlines.
So basically, dot your I's, cross your T's.
Yeah, exactly. Be meticulous, be organized, and don't procrastinate.
Solid advice. All right, so those are the don'ts. But what about the do's? What are some proactive things our listeners can do to really boost their chances of getting their application approved? The guide had some pretty good pro tips for form management, didn't it?
It did. And they're really worth taking to heart. So tip number 1, do your research. Figure out which visa is actually the best fit for you. Don't just guess.
Yeah, don't just go for the easiest one, go for the right one.
Right, exactly. Tip number 2, get your documents together early, like way early. Don't wait till the last minute because some of this stuff can take time to get.
Like those police certificates, those can take a while.
Exactly. Tip number 3, this is huge. Check. Double check, triple check your application. And if you can, get someone else to look it over too.
Fresh eyes are golden.
Fresh eyes, absolutely. Okay, tip number 4, make sure you're using the latest version of the form. They update these things, so don't get caught out with an old one.
Where would you even find the latest version?
Always go to the source. The Department of Home Affairs website, that's your Bible.
Your go-to, yeah.
Tip number 5, stick to the guidelines, read them carefully, follow them to the letter. And tip number 6, this is just common sense, but submit your application early. Give yourself some breathing room.
Don't cut it close.
Don't cut it close. And lastly, if you're feeling lost, if you're confused, get some professional help. Talk to a registered migration agent. they know their stuff.
They can save you a lot of stress.
Well, so much stress.
Okay, so those are some really great tips. Anything else that really stood out to you as being super important?
Yeah, a couple of things. I mean, first of all, be honest. Don't lie. Don't mislead. It's just not worth it. And then when it comes to your finances, make sure your bank statements are crystal clear. You know, show them you've got the money to support yourself.
Yeah, no funny business.
No funny business, right? And keep track of your application. Check the status online, see where things are at. If you need to go for an interview, be prepared. Practice your answers, know your stuff. And this is important. Things change, rules change, so stay up to date on any changes to immigration laws.
Yeah, you don't want to get caught out by a surprise change.
Nope, not at all.
Uh,
And then, this is a simple one, but make copies of everything. Keep those records safe,
just in case?
just in case.
Yeah.
You never know when you might need them.
Okay, so it really sounds like being organized and being thorough is half the battle.
More than half, I'd say.
Right. So what about those people who, they need a little extra help? Where can they go to get some support with this whole process?
Well, the guide mentions a few good resources. So there are registered migration agents. They're like the experts. They can give you legal advice, help you with the paperwork, the whole shebang. Then there are immigration consultants. They're also really knowledgeable, especially about the visa process and the latest rules. And you know what? This is kind of interesting. The guide actually mentioned that there are like YouTube and LinkedIn influencers who talk about Australian immigration.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so you can check them out, see what they have to say. But always remember, double check anything important with the official sources.
So the Department of Home Affairs website is still the ultimate authority.
Absolutely.
Okay, so why is it a good idea to get different opinions, to talk to different people about this?
Well, for one thing, you might discover that you qualify for a visa that you didn't even know about. More options, that's always good. And also, hearing about other people's experiences, that can help you avoid making the same mistakes. And immigration rules can be, complicated, open to interpretation. So different experts might have different insights.
Different perspectives.
Yeah, and the more perspectives you get, the better informed you'll be.
The more well-rounded your knowledge.
Exactly.
Okay, so the guide also had some pretty interesting statistics about visa applications and rejections and all that. What kind of things did they share?
Okay, so some good news. The student visa acceptance rate in 2024 was 89%.
So pretty high.
Yeah, pretty good odds. And they granted over 150,000 skilled migration visas that year. But here's the thing, and this is important for our listeners. 40% of rejections were because of bad documentation, and another 30% were because people couldn't prove they had enough money.
Wow, that's huge. So really getting those two things right, that's key.
That's where you got to focus your energy. Make sure your paperwork is perfect, and make sure you can prove you can afford to be in Australia.
Absolutely. Now, there was also a really inspiring success story in the guide, wasn't there? Tell us about Maria and how she managed to get her visa approved.
Yeah, Maria, she's a software engineer from India, and she wanted to move to Australia to work. She was smart, though. She knew this was a big deal, so she hired a registered migration agent to help her. The agent made sure all her documents were in order and that she met all the requirements. And Maria submitted her application well in advance of the deadline.
So she was organized and proactive.
Exactly. And guess what? Her visa was approved in just 3 months.
That's fantastic.
See, it pays to be prepared.
It really does. Now, the guide also mentioned an organization called LetzStudy, and they work specifically with students, right?
Right, they help students with the whole visa application process.
So tell us about that. Tell us about some of the students that LetzStudy has helped.
Okay, so there was this guy, Shantakumar. He wanted to do his MBA in Australia. But he was finding the whole visa thing really confusing, He wasn't sure which subclass he needed. He was worried about the financial stuff. The whole thing was stressing him out. So he went to LetzStudy, and they really helped him out. They gave him advice. They helped him with his documents. They made sure everything was perfect. So they took a lot of the pressure off him. They did.
Yeah.
They did.
Yeah.
And he got his visa without any problems.
That's great.
Yeah,
Oh,
it is.
yeah.
Then there was Rajath. He'd already filled out his application, but he wasn't sure if he'd done it right. He was worried about making mistakes.
The big deal. You don't want to mess it up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So he went to LetzStudy, and they went through his application with a fine-tooth comb. And they actually found a couple errors in his GTE statement and some mistakes in his bank statements.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so they helped him fix those. And he ended up submitting a really strong application. and his visa was approved really quickly.
So they probably saved him months of waiting.
Probably, yeah. And then there was Yasha's SK. He was having trouble with the whole health insurance thing, the OSHC.
Oh, yeah, that can be confusing.
And he was also struggling to get his police certificate from his home country. So LetzStudy stepped in. They helped him choose the right insurance. They helped him with the medical exam. And they made sure he had all the right documents for his police certificate.
So they basically held his hand through the whole process.
They did. They did. And because of that, his application was complete, it was valid, and he didn't experience any delays.
That's really amazing. It sounds like LetzStudy is doing some really important work.
They are. They are. They're making a big difference for a lot of students.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground today. Let's bring it all together. What's the one big takeaway that our listeners should remember from this deep dive into the Australian immigration form?
Okay, so bottom line, this form, it's important. It's not something you want to rush through. You got to pay attention to the details, you got to be prepared, and you got to understand what's required for the specific visa you're applying for.
And that's different for everyone.
It's different for everyone, right?
So don't just assume that what worked for your friend is going to work for you.
Exactly.
And, by understanding the process, by knowing the pitfalls, by knowing where to get help, well, our listeners can feel a lot more confident about tackling this whole thing.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power. The more you know, the better your chances of success.
And the less stress you'll have.
So much less stress, yeah.
So as you're getting ready to embark on this Australian immigration journey, here's something to think about. We talked about how a lot of rejections are because of documentation and financial issues. So what can you do right now, today, to make sure that those things are not going to be a problem for you? Maybe go to the Department of Home Affairs website, have another look at the requirements, maybe even talk to a migration agent, get some personalized advice. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.